Welcome back to Beauty Marks Podcast, a space where we embrace marks acquired through our journey. My name is Elizabeth Savion, and thank you for joining me on this week's episode. This week is episode 51, and I just want to be real with you guys. Like, a lot has been going on, and when I say a lot, it's like I recently, there's like so much in my mind. Like, this episode is definitely me being very honest and open. But at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, guys, it is very hard to be vulnerable when you have your own stuff going on. And like, you don't want to be like open wounds sharing a whole bunch of stuff because you're like still working through some things. So I thought, you know what? I think I'm gonna do an episode about advice or things I have learned through my therapy or from my therapist, I guess, through counseling that I've been going through these past few months. I actually have shared on here, that I am all about mental health and an advocate for you going to therapy, you getting counseling, because I'm telling you, it is life changing. Not because you are not capable of working through your own problems, you just end up getting to truly understand more of yourself and just really getting tools that you need um that maybe you weren't taught, because a lot of the stuff that I have learned in therapy is honestly just tools and things that I can apply in those moments, or if I get triggered from trauma or things that I have been through. So it's just being more self-aware. That is really what I have been working on. And so, you know how we're all about embracing our marks. Today is definitely embracing my marks of therapy and my mental health, because if I'm completely honest, I recently have, I would say, like for 2 months already, I've been just going through it. Like, and the thing is that the one thing that is like a hard thing for me to process or to kind of like overcome and show up is because I want to be a place of encouragement, and I want to be a place where I can encourage others or inspire or help others going through some stuff. But I have honestly been needing a lot of encouragement recently. I've been needing a lot of support and just kind of have been hard. It's been harder for me to show up recently. And I will talk more about it more on another episode, but and I honestly have even thought about getting my counselor on this podcast and just kind of doing like a therapy session so that you guys can kind of see how that works and see how that goes, and just like me being very honest and open, and her, just the whole dynamic between that, because I'm telling you, it has been life changing. But it's still, does all this to say is that even though, yes, I am in therapy, I do encourage people, I do want to help other people. I have, this, I don't know, this like, I like to be positive. I like to be, um, helpful, but everybody's like real life doesn't always look like how it does on social media. So I just want you guys to like, this is me being an honest, vulnerable human moment, that like, just because I've been traveling or I post pictures, and that's really what started this whole podcast, is knowing that behind the feed that you might see, behind the social media platforms that people have, there is a person that goes through life stuff, that has hurdles and has hard moments. And I'm not one to personally, there's just me, like to cry on my stories or things like that. But I do write. So like I try to write out, with my feelings, or I try to express it in another way, or like even through this podcast, like share things. So I just want you guys to first take that bit, that like, I hope you know that social media is like a very small percentage of someone's life. And I'm just talking about my life because I am blessed, but it's just like emotionally. Um, I'm okay, but it's something that is just like, you just have your ups and downs and just like have hard days, or just get in your thoughts and your mind, or just have something happen that like throws you off. So yeah, it's just me processing my emotions. Um I'm honestly wanting to be open. Like, I have been feeling just sad, disappointed, just discouraged, just lonely. So those are all just honest feelings that I've been feeling, and I'm working through a lot of them, and I know that they're just temporary, but at the same time, like, I want to be honest and open with you guys so that you guys know that, like, I love sharing on this podcast, and I really, really, really do. But I have been having my own personal battles, that I'm personally working through. So today I thought it would be great to talk about what my therapist or through my counseling sessions have come to become more aware of, or great advice. The first thing I would say is that separating acknowledging my feelings has been the one most important thing that I really have learned through therapy, has been to validate my feelings. So, like, if I'm feeling something, it's for a reason. Like, if I'm feeling hurt by something, or if I am feeling offended by something, or I'm feeling sad, like, there's a reason, and I have to validate that feeling. Does that mean that, like, because that's my truth. So, like, does that mean that I'm led by my emotions? No. But I have to acknowledge my feelings. Before, I would suppress all my feelings. So, like, I felt something, but I still, like, contradicted what I felt. So, like, something super simple, like, if you genuinely feel uncomfortable around someone, but you're, like, putting yourself out there because you want to, like, please someone else, like, you're putting exposing yourself to someone because you want to please them, or always being, oh, this is the classic, always being like, I'm fine, like something hurtful just happened and everybody knows that that thing just happened to you, whatever it might be, like in a conflict, or you found out some information that hurt you, or someone passed away in your family, like it can be deep things, and you just being like, I'm fine, like everything's fine, like you're not validating that, like, it's okay to, like, be sad. Like, what just happened was very disappointing or discouraging or sad, or I am processing my emotions. So that language, and that goes into knowing, having an emotional vocabulary of knowing when you're sad, angry, mad, disappointed is very, very important. And that is something that, um with my counselor, she always asks me, she's like, but, like, what is that feeling? So, like, you're telling me your thoughts, but, like, what is that feeling? So, like, what do you feel? Is it that? And that's what I have come up with, which what I shared with you guys is, like, I feel sad, like, I just feel like a deep sadness, or I feel just discouraged, or like I have no motivation, or I feel angry, so, like, knowing what the emotion is, so it's having an emotional vocabulary, which we're not taught. Like, usually it's always like just happy, sad, mad, um and it's good to be able to tell, um when our emotions, or why we're feeling, maybe we don't understand why we usually explain why we're feeling a certain way, but it usually is tied into an emotion that we're feeling. So I think that that's very, um, important to have those vocabularies. Another thing I feel like that I have found through counseling is definitely about boundaries. I just tell my friends this, that I'm like, I go to therapy so that you guys can get the information, but it's honestly also because I have seen how, like, the thought process that you have to, like, unlearn a lot of the stuff that you learned, with boundaries. You like, I know I didn't know before how much control I really had over, myself. I think that I really thought that, like, I can control others, but I didn't have it over myself. Like, I didn't practice my control. um I just try to impose the control and trying to change or fix or someone else, instead of, like, being like, let me work on myself, let me control my emotions, or let me control my exposure to someone, or let me stop this thought pattern that I have, so, like, more like looking inward. But boundaries really taught me that you can allow the access that others have to you. Like, don't allow so many people to have access to you and bring their negativity, their toxicity, all these things around you just because you want to people please. Because that is one thing that through counseling have really found out that I'm a recovering codependent people pleaser. And I had to kind of work through those things to realize what was the root of it, because there's always a root of what is going on, of our actions. So when we act out a certain way or we think a certain way, it's usually because of something that we experienced, um, that has kind of reprogrammed our brain to think that's okay. Like, so we justify things, or we um, always think about what other people would do versus like my feelings, or like what I would do as an individual, like have my own thoughts. So, I feel like boundaries has really taught me, what I want, what are my absolute no's, what are not my non-negotiables, what are, um, what is what I really need, and, to take care of myself, to take care of my person. So boundaries when it comes to families, relationships, just even work, just knowing what are my limits and not trying to do things like whenever I do things, like thinking about like, is that what I would do? Or is my decision based on someone else? Because my decisions used to be filtered with pleasing other people. So people not being mad at me, or people not being upset or hurt, or maybe they didn't agree with me. So then I would change what I wanted to do to please them. So um it was really decisions that I was doing because of other people, instead of being like, Liz, what do you want? Which honestly, I feel like I talk to myself a lot, not gonna lie. Like, I usually like try to replay, or like, is that really what you want? Or are you doing it for someone else? Or like if someone has a negative emotion, realizing that I can't control what they feel or how they take what happened. Um, so all those things have been very important that I have learned. Boundaries is probably the one thing that I can spend so much time talking about, because that has been like stuck in my brain and like hammered to be like, you're not, like, is that like your no is not a no? Like, is that really what you want, or is that really because someone else, like, my intentions, um and what I need, like, is that hurting you for doing that decision, but you're doing it anyways? Like, are you really contradicting or hurting yourself by making that decision? So that has been the process, of boundaries that I have learned and worked through with my therapist, because I realized how I didn't know what that really was and how to actually apply them in my life and my situations that I would have. Um, so another thing is that most of our problems as adults are truly childhood problems unresolved. So half of the stuff, like when you look at other people, before I didn't see it like this. I just thought that this was like a reaction of someone that was like such a bitter person, or was so evil, or they were so selfish, or, all these things, or people would act in a certain way, people, that they just don't know how to resolve issues, or they, you know, are super angry, they yell at you, or they do silent treatment, or they gossip, or they are super, they criticize everyone, or they always have something to say. Like, I always used to think all these things were just, how people are. Like, people are rude, people are mean, but in reality, it's usually those are symptoms of childhood trauma not resolved. So that's usually them, people, um because they have internal issues, like we all do, because then we end up having these adult temper tantrums. So like, we end up lashing out at people because we have a lot of inward issues that we feel, and we just don't know how to process them, so we do it in the best way that we can. And I think knowing that that is the problem, and knowing how important like your years between 0 and 5 years old are, of development of your attachment styles, of the way like your life experiences, how that has shaped you as an individual, and like what happened in those years or like what didn't happen in those years, um, I feel like has made me just so much more self-aware and also aware of others to be like, oh, so like not taking everything personal. Like it's actually not personal. It's actually because they have a lot of trauma, which again, we all do. So I think that realizing in my own self has been just realizing like, the rejections that I went through, the little like heartbreaks that I went through, um, jealous friends or like toxic dynamics that I had from childhood, like from like even elementary school, which is crazy, or middle school, um, how those things have like shaped a lot of the ways that I think and like what other people would teach me. And then also like the instability, like this is just a real example, but like the instability, I moved a lot like when I was young. So like from the ages of 0 to 5, I had already moved like I think two or no, no, I had moved to another country. I moved to from Miami to Honduras, then back to Miami. And then by 6, I was living in Oklahoma. So like I moved, there was a lot of instability in my upbringing, like those first core years. Was very loved though, like was very loved, had a lot of people and a lot of care around me, like a family members and all of that. But there is a lot of instability. So how that has shaped a lot of the ways that I have done my life, and issues that have come up as adults. So those are just like little things, but it does shape us, so knowing that, a lot of, even as you react to things or how your maybe your parents or your grandparents, half of the stuff is just because they have a lot of trauma from their childhood, and not only from that, but it's like then other experiences in life that happen to us also just like keep hitting those traumas. And if we don't ever deal with them, then we try to find a way to cope with the feeling, or the emotion or the numbness, whatever way we decide to do it. Another thing is about having grace with yourself, as you grow and acknowledge those areas. So, like, even as in therapy, if you have ever gone to therapy, or maybe you haven't because you just think it's not a good investment, I definitely beg to differ. But I have known that, like, even when you're like just going through a rough time, how much grace we don't have for ourselves, but we have for other people. And I'm speaking to myself right now because I know that, for example, like in these last 2 months that I've been just feeling very out of it, um, and just have been going through like an emotional roller coaster, I definitely feel like I have been frustrated with myself because I'm like, Liz, you're in counseling, you have all these resources, you are blessed, you have all the essentials that you need. Like, why are you going up and down in your emotions? Like, why, like, you should be over this. Like, you should never experience that again. Like, you went through that. You went through depression, anxiety, really, really bad in the past few years. But like, now we should be good. Like, we should never encounter that problem again. But that's not true. We are humans and things happen, and we do have emotional roller coasters. We have experiences that happen that trigger us, that hurt us, that kind of set us back a little bit. And I've had to really sit with that and try to understand and have grace with with the pace that I'm going. Um, because I feel like now I'm able to really see what's going on. And in the beginning, I was kind of trying to push through the feeling and fake it, and that wasn't working. And then I feel like when I had a little crack and I um, ended up realizing that I was like forcing myself to not feel or, be hurt by things that were happening. So I I think that we're just tougher on ourselves. Like my counselor the other day, she was like, Liz, like you have very high, unrealistic standards for yourself. Like you put yourself as like you need to be very perfect. And I think that that is something that I have struggled with since I started the podcast, that I told you guys, was that, with me being a planner, which has definitely gotten way better. Like, I definitely feel like I've learned to like let go and just take things as they come. However, when it comes to myself, I feel like I put myself at a certain standard. And then I also feel like then I project my standards onto other people based on the way that I see myself, or the standards that I have for myself. So it's just an unhealthy dynamic, which I'm learning, which I honestly genuinely thought that that wasn't the case. Like, I thought I was good. Like, I thought that, I'm working on these things. I'm working through a lot of stuff, and I'm healing and all of that. So like, I didn't think that would come up again, but it did. And so then we went back to like, okay, so like, where did this start? Like, why are we a perfectionist? Like, do you feel like your labels, or do you feel like your position or your income, like, is what is who you are? Like, is that what defines you? Is that where you find your identity in? And is it because you feel a little lost right now? So then you feel like, so all these things, like, is it because you think that you should be in another position right now at your age? Like, are you having one of those like realizations? So like, we had to walk through some stuff, but um I feel like I'm just learning to like acknowledge and like take a step back, and knowing also my body and what I need, because I'm also reading this book that's called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about how trauma, um or things that happen in our life, because some people, just to clarify, trauma is not only um a huge, people usually think about trauma as a huge situation that happens in your life, like a death or an abuse, or those kinds of things. I feel like people correlate trauma to that, but that's actually not the case. Trauma is any event in your life that caused extreme sense of hopelessness, horror, that really scarred you, that um, really changed your life, that shifted your life. It can be a lot of things if you break it down. So we've all experienced it. It's just any situation that's big for you, and it might not even be big for anybody else. Might just be big for you, um, or a troubling time for you. Focusing on what your body tells you. So like, if you're having a lot of headaches, if you're very tired, if you are having like bathroom issues, if you're having hives on your body, if you're swelling, or you're bloated, so many things, like change of appetite, there's back pain, there's muscle joint pain that you might experience, like your body kind of carries that. Any experience that you feel, or any event, any trauma that you have experienced, like your body, and any emotion that you haven't processed through, and you're just kind of like suppressing or not dealing with, usually that comes out in our body. So like, our body is usually the one that tells us like, hey, you have to pay attention to this, like there's something going on here. So I've been more aware of that, and understanding that like, I just have to go with the flow of what I need to do right now. Like, you know, give myself some time, and give myself what it needs. And so, emotions are really what makes us human. And as I'm telling you that, like, I feel like in this process of what I've learned from my therapist, and like through therapy, is like, we really all have issues, and it's really about progress over perfection. Like, we will never get to perfection. Like, even as you're working on yourself, you will never complete, like, you'll still have little triggers, like you'll still have little things, like if it's, for example, like snapping back at someone, like if you had a rough day, and usually you act and you try to like act in peace and love, but like one day you just have a really rough day, and so someone says something and you just say, snap back. And then, that can make you feel frustrated because you're like, wow, like I thought I worked on that. Like I thought I'm, good. But sometimes like you're just going through it. And that doesn't mean that all your work that you've done on yourself comes undone just because of those setbacks. If it's one or if it's five. So it's just knowing that, some people are willing to do the work and others are not, and that's okay. But also like because we all have issues, um, acknowledging your responsibility when it comes to your own mental health and your emotions, and you can do the work for yourself. That doesn't mean that other people around you are going to do it for themselves. And just because they are older, or other people around you are older, does not mean that they are emotionally mature. They might not even have an emotional vocabulary or know how to process their emotions, because half of the time it's what we are taught, that we just end up going off of that. For me, counseling has been a place to process my emotions, things of my past, and understanding more of my behaviors. I feel like I'm understood. Like, I feel like I realize that I'm not crazy. I remember when I first started, I would literally be like, is this normal? Like, what I think, is this normal? Like, is this wrong? Like, or if I would say something, or say something that was a little out of context, she'd be like, let's talk more about that. And so then I was like, oh, I didn't like see that as a big deal. Like I've been talking to myself in this way for the longest, or I've been speaking this narrative for a really long time. And then she would like help me to understand and dive deeper into why do you think that? Like, why do you think that about yourself? And so I just feel like knowing that I'm processing and healing and all of that is good for me personally. That's been very rewarding to know that I'm able to work through some stuff. It has brought this year, I feel like, has brought up so much emotions, like, because I feel like in past episodes I've shared that in Growing Pains, I shared that it felt like a can of worms, like I just opened it and then like everything came out. Like I feel like I just having to process those emotions and grieve through your past self, like the past version of you, or the version of you that um, was just different, has been a little difficult. And the hard truths about healing are usually that like healing isn't linear. Like there will be ups and downs, and that's part of the process. Like there'll be days that you feel like you took 15 steps back, but then you're still on track. And usually, sometimes that means that you can't heal in the same place where you got hurt. So sometimes you have to um, disconnect yourself from people that you do love but are not good for you at the moment. Some relationships can be mended and healed and restored. Others, you can just wish the best from afar. So that in the process of healing, I feel like I wasn't really prepared for that. Another thing is realizing how much dysfunction is in yourself and in your environment. So that reality that hits you, that's hard to process, of like, wow, like I created this. Like you have to take full responsibility of your own actions. It's not blaming or shifting the blame to others, because in therapy it's usually about you. Like as much as you can talk about what happened or what someone else did to you, which you have to accept and process, or let's say, if it's your parents or a relationship, like in most scenarios in therapy, as much as you can talk about a situation that happened, it's also how you feel, like how you are processing, what actions you're going to take. Like it always goes back to you. Like, so taking full responsibility for like your own behavior, and then also understanding what was someone else's, or like the consequences of that. So that was hard for me. And also another hard truth of healing is just understanding that you do create a new normal. So it's like that grieving phase of your old self, or that fight be internally inside you, of like this old thinking, and then catching yourself like, wait, no, that's not what we are supposed to think about. Like that's not right. Like that's not true, like of what you're telling to yourself. um so that has been my journey in therapy and healing, which has been really good. And all this to say that I definitely recommend it. I definitely recommend going to therapy, getting mental help for your mental health, because honestly, it is very rewarding. And just like you go to the doctor, you go to checkups, you go to all these other things when you need an expert in that area, the same thing goes with your internal being. Aside from God, in prayer, that I know that He heals us and He can work in us and work and, soften our hearts and soften other people's hearts. Sometimes there are some things that we have to do practically, and seek out wisdom and wise counsel. And sometimes that's not in your immediate circle. Sometimes that has to be a professional. And sometimes that's even better, to be honest, because I feel unjudged. Like I feel like judge-free zone. Like I don't have to be a certain person for, my counselor. Like she knows my trauma, she knows my history, she knows a lot of things. And I feel like she can just truly see me, and like I can be known and seen, in another light. So yeah, so I wanted to share this because it has been helpful to me, and I really hope that you can look for something for you. There's a website that I know that's called betterhelp.com, and it's online counseling. It's something that I definitely recommend. And, if you need any suggestions or have any questions about therapy, counseling, my own process, anything, please let me know. I feel like when it comes to counseling, I share the information that I learn or even the people that I refer. But I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and just got some insight, just knowing and reassuring you guys and just reminding you guys that life has its ups and downs and it's not always perfect or peachy for anyone. So it's like, just be nice to someone, check in on someone. If you feel like someone is going through a rough patch, understand that it's not personal, and, make other people feel loved. And if you're the one that's going through a rough patch, have grace with yourself. It will pass. And understand the process and do the things that are good for you. So understand what you need during this time. Praying for you guys. I really hope that, you guys know that you're not alone, and that anything that is happening in your life, anything that you're experiencing is not defining the end of your story. So I really hope you guys have a great week. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow me at Elizabeth Sabi, and I will see you guys next week.